Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today I got a fun and exciting episode for you guys this evening because we're going over the new PlayStation 2 emulator over on RetroArch LRPS2. That's the first and last time I'm going to say that because I just want to keep saying PCSX2 and I screw that intro up like 6 times. And just so you are aware, this is a branch of PCSX2, basically completely recompiled, rewritten with new options for RetroArch, making it an awesome alternative to the standalone emulator. And honestly, any new way to play some of the best video games of all time is alright in my book. Before getting far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But right off the top, I'm playing Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution in 4K internal rendering resolution upscale in RetroArch, and it's working every bit as good as I would expect it to, and that is a win in my book. And this new core comes with a ton of awesome options because for the longest time, PlayStation 2 inside RetroArch definitely lagged behind the standalone PCSX2 emulator. If you asked me a month ago what I would recommend if you wanted to emulate PS2 games, I would tell you to avoid RetroArch and go right to the standalone. That's not a knock on RetroArch, it was just one of the things that wasn't as mature. So if you pop over to Core Downloader today and you go ahead and regenerate the core list, you're going to see a brand new core inside of the downloader. Just go ahead and scroll down until you hit S for Sony and you will find it there. It's going to be LRPS2. And next Saturday we'll have a full setup guide for this. This video is not that because I do need to spend a little bit more time with it, getting the process down so I know you'll all understand it. So expect that next Saturday. But if you download that, you will have the new PlayStation 2 core for RetroArch, and then you'll be able to play PlayStation 2 your heart's content outside of the standalone emulator. And I totally understand some people just like doing RetroArch builds and never leaving that program for their emulation box needs. So leave me a comment down below and you tell me, are you primarily a standalone emulator user or are you more of a RetroArch user? I would say that I probably use both just about as much, and obviously I have a metric crap ton of real hardware in my collection when I need real hardware captures as well. But honestly, Virtua Fighter 4 here running in 4K internally looks absolutely stunning on my PC. Now I can't promise you're going to get the exact same result you see here. It's all going to be dependent on your system specs. And for a baseline, I am running an i9-12900K overclocked on a water cooler as well as a 3080 Ti. It's not the most modern system. I purchased it maybe about 2.5-3 years ago, but it is more than up to the task to get 4K internal rendering resolution out of PlayStation without really dropping any frames. But depending on your system specs, you might get something different, so just be aware of that. And again, this is based on PCSX2, but RetroArch cores basically take existing emulators and work them into the RetroArch backend. And for a long time, like I said, PlayStation 2 inside of RetroArch, it was functional, but it wouldn't really be what anyone recommended. So this is just different than PCSX2, and if you're totally happy just using PCSX2, then there really isn't any particular reason to change. This is more the fact that that one program RetroArch is going to give you pretty much every emulator out there, and now on the PlayStation 2 side of things, it's going to be a lot more buttoned up and mature than it ever was before, and that's definitely something that RetroArch needed. It needed a little bit of an update on the PlayStation 2 side of things. Because go ahead and take a look at this footage of Ico here. This is running at 1x native resolution internally, and I would say even at that, it is still a stunningly pretty game. And if for some strange reason you've never played Ico before, or the pseudo sequel Shadow of the Colossus, I can't recommend them enough. They're Hall of Fame first ballot good level games, and they basically kind of just define the games as art movement. And even if you don't want to upscale internally, I would say this is still a very attractive image. It looks like Ico, it plays like Ico, everything is exactly as I would expect. But of course, within the core, you're going to have a ton of different core options. So we can go like something like this, doing it 1x resolution. We can pop it right over to that 4K resolution, and you'll see all of it get much clearer right in front of your eyes. Now again, the polygons are going to be scaling, but 2D elements don't do the exact same thing. But no matter how you scale this thing, it just holds up and looks incredible. I did try to bump up to 8K and I lost a few frames there, so I pulled that footage out of the timeline. That might be a little bit too high test even for my system. But this looks spectacular inside of RetroArch, and I would say the latency is no worse than you would see in PCSX2. On games like Ico, you would never notice there's any latency whatsoever, and depending on what you're running in the background on your PC, you may notice more or less latency, depending on what other system resources are going on. But this, as well as PCSX, are very low latency emulators, and you can basically play whatever game you want so long as you have a fast enough system, and you should be totally fine. But at 4K, just look at that model there. It looks so much clearer than an original PlayStation 2, and it's always great to get new options as far as how people play retro games, because you know full well I don't really care how you play the game so long as you keep playing them. And there is going to be a whole host of new options in the core as well. You'll see here, I choose Vulkan as the new renderer by choice, but there's a ton of different options, some of which I'm still playing around with. You'll see here the Parallel EIGS or graphics synthesizer renderer. That is a new version of the renderer that's going to have stuff like super sampling, and I am still playing with that in the background. That it is a big component of this new core for RetroArch. It is still the early days though, so definitely give it a shot. Play around with things, go ahead and do that super sampling, try to play around with the level of detail texturing. It is a ton of fun just to find out what this thing can do under the hood, because it is brand new, and having a new core for RetroArch along with a new renderer is going to be a great time. And I would say Silent Hill 2, even the film grain effect in 4K on the new renderer looks absolutely stunning, and as far as the sound is concerned, sounds exactly like it should to my ears. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds, and I'll be right back with more.
In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now, in our special place, waiting for you.
I mean, that sounds exactly like Silent Hill should to my ears, but you leave me a comment down below and you tell me what you think. And pretty much every game I've thrown at this new core so far has worked exactly as I expect. Soul Calibur 3 here looks absolutely stunning in 4K, and you can definitely tell what the developers are going for as far as the quote-unquote art style was concerned in this game. But it's another instance in which if there were any frame drops or any sort of latency in the controls outside of what would be the frame inputs for the moves, you would 100% feel it almost instantaneously, and it would kind of ruin your gameplay experience. The good thing is, with the new core, that is not happening to me whatsoever. I am just playing games. They are running absolutely spectacularly, and I have no complaints about it whatsoever. And again, just as a reminder, if you have PCSX2 dialed in exactly the way you want, then there really isn't any huge reason to move over to something like this new RetroArch core unless you want to play around with the new renderer. But if you are the type of user that likes everything in RetroArch, maybe you throw a front end on and you're happy and you move on with your day, then this is going to be an absolutely awesome improvement over the previous state of PlayStation 2 emulation within RetroArch. It is just fundamentally night and day better. It is such a better experience, and I can't recommend upgrading to this new core enough if you haven't already done so and you are on RetroArch. Let's just test out a couple more games. SSX on Tour, maybe not the best game in the world, but I actually quote-unquote worked on this behind the scenes because some of the licensed equipment in the game was for companies I worked for back in the day when I worked for in skiing. So I actually did a little bit of the licensing agreement between EA and the company I worked for to get some of the products in the game as licensed, and that was always a fun time. We had a PlayStation 2 set up in my office along with a copy of the game when it came out, and we just sit around the office playing when we probably should be working. But when you work in winter sports, honestly, pretty much every day is a play day, not a work day, unless you are doing your budget for the year. But I'm getting way off track now. Just wanted to play a game that I haven't played in years just to see how it holds up, and honestly here again on the emulator I have no complaints whatsoever. I just can't remember how the hell you control this game. I am a much better skier in real life than I am virtually. But moving back over to Ico just for a moment, this is just such a stunning image, and it shows how much life there is in the PlayStation 2 as far as a software platform is concerned. There's so many incredible games, and if you feel like maybe the visuals are antiquated or you didn't grow up with PlayStation 2 and you don't have that nostalgia for the look, then something like this new core in RetroArch with all of its new rendering options, all of its internal rendering resolution bump options, is just going to give you an image that feels like it's almost running on PlayStation 3. Obviously Ico has the remasters both on PlayStation 3 and beyond, but if you want to play the original version, playing it in this new RetroArch core with all of the scaling turned up as far as you can take it really does give you an incredible image. And sometimes honestly, upscaling internally on the original models versus going through the remastered models is a more attractive look than I think the remasters give. You might notice a stray line of pixels on the left hand side. I left that in because it's how it appears on my screen. Sometimes when you bump the internal resolution and you have these letterboxes come in, it doesn't stretch all the way to the edge. And this is also going to give you widescreen support as well, although I usually play the games in their original aspect ratios as intended by the developers. But right here, Ico, all of the models, everything I tested on the new core for PlayStation 2 was a 10 out of 10, and I have have zero complaints. And that's the current news with PlayStation 2 emulation as far as RetroArch is concerned. There is a brand new core out there. It's got brand new rendering options, and it is leaps and bounds better than anything we had for PlayStation 2 on RetroArch before. So definitely give it a shot. If you're already playing it, leave me your thoughts down below. I'll have the setup guide next weekend, but we're done, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.